I unlocked 4 disturbing true terror stories that will haunt your nights forever. I never should have opened that door. It was just supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday evening. The kind where I'd settle in with a cup of tea and binge-watch my favorite show. But the air felt heavy. Unease crept up my spine. I shrugged it off, until I heard the whispering. It started softly, a faint hiss, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. But there was no wind. I glanced around my dimly lit living room, shadows dancing in the flickering light. The darkness seemed to swallow the corners of the room, stretching out against the pale walls. I tried to calm my racing heart. Just my imagination, I told myself. Then, a loud bang echoed from the back of the house. My pulse quickened. I stepped toward the noise, each footstep echoing through the silence like a drum. Goosebumps prickled my arms as I reached the hallway. Shadows lurked, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. My breath quickened, and the cold air wrapped around me like an ice sheet. I felt its thin presence. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, my instincts screaming for me to turn back. But curiosity won over fear. As I neared the door at the end of the hall, whispers merged into a chaotic melody. I could almost make out words me name. There was no question now. I was being drawn in. I reached for the handle, heart pounding, a lump forming in my throat. I twisted it slowly, the metal cold against my palm. When the door creaked open, the dark abyss beyond seemed to exhale, inviting me into its darkness. Suddenly, I heard a crash. My heart dropped, icy tendrils coiling in my chest. I stepped back, breathless. The door slammed shut on its own, cutting off my escape. I spun around to face it, panic clawing at me. A figure swayed in the shadows, just outside of sight. Every instinct told me to run, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, terror paralyzing me. Then, the whispers turned into a scream. My blood ran cold as the silhouette lunged toward me. I stumbled back, barely keeping my balance. What was happening? Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The room blurred around me as I stumbled back against the wall, fingers brushing the cool, peeling paint. I could hear my heart drumming in my ears, drowning out the screams that were now indistinguishable from the whispers that had drawn me in moments before. I blinked, trying to regain focus. The figure was now fully formed, bathed in an eerie luminescence that flickered like static, its features shifting and contorting with every flicker of the light. It recognized me. I could see the glimmer of recognition in its unholy eyes. "Help me," the entity wrenched out, its voice a raspy echo that made my skin crawl. "You have to see." It lunged forward again, and this time, I dared to flee, racing back down the hallway. But the walls twisted as if they were alive, narrowing, forcing me towards the door. I collided with it, heavy and unyielding. As I pounded against the wood, I felt the air thicken around me, the shadows creeping ever closer. But as I pushed against the door, I glanced back, and now there were more figures, stretching from the corners, their mouths moving in silent wails, a chorus of souls trapped beyond the veil. Each face bore a haunting familiarity, faces of those I once knew, now twisted in anguish. "You have to remember," they seemed to say, their movements frantic and desperate. Horrified, I forced myself against the door again and felt it finally give way, swinging open with an agonizing creak. I darted forward into the next room, illuminated softly by the pale glow of the moon streaming through a grimy window. My breath was ragged now, the edges of reality bleeding into one another as my surroundings spun. The living room was different. Furniture lay scattered as if something had exploded within those walls. But it was the illustrations on the walls that caught my eye, wretched faces intertwined with grotesque scenes. They were painted, no, etched into the very structure itself, our family's past, but twisted beyond recognition. I took a step closer, drawn to one image in particular. A figure that looked just like me, standing at the entrance of a door, but the door was wide open, revealing a void that churned with darkness and despair. I turned away, nausea clawing at my stomach. I needed to leave, but as I turned, the whispers returned, sharper now, fingernails raking at my sanity, hissing my name with a chilling intimacy that felt like a lover's caress. "You must see," they cried again, closer now, so close that I could feel the cool breath of desperation against my skin. Suddenly, the walls shuddered, and the shadows twisted into a solid form, a dark mass moving towards me, blocking my escape. Panic surged through my veins as I stumbled backward, falling to the floor. My fingers grasped the cold wooden planks, splinters digging in as waves of dread washed over me. The voice of the figure who had lunged at me echoed in my mind. "Help me." That's when I realized it was not just a figure, it was me, or the remnants of me. It wore my features, but the eyes gleamed with an otherworldly horror, a void of emptiness. "Why won't you help?" it asked, and I felt an overwhelming wave of despair wash over me. "You can't escape what's coming for you." But I couldn't process the words. I couldn't stay. I scrambled to my feet, sprinting towards the lone exit, but the shadows reached for me with desperate hands. I could feel them just at my heels, clawing at the fabric of my being, searching for entry. I pushed through the door just as a cold grip latched onto my ankle. With a ferocious yelp, I twisted free, tumbling into the night. The air was different outside, thick and suffocating. I could still hear their cries, faint echoes in the wind. I staggered to a halt, panting, scanning the darkness around me. The house loomed like a malevolent specter behind me, its windows now wide and gaping, like hungry mouths. Then I saw it. In the moon's pale light, figures emerged from the trees surrounding my home, eyes glowing with an unnatural light, their forms shifting between illusion and reality. The ground trembled beneath my feet as they swarmed towards me, whispers flowing like smoke, knitting together a harrowing promise of what awaited me. Time seemed to distort as a cacophony of screams filled the night, merging with the whispers as they all reached for me. Name echoed like a haunting refrain, and the terror paraded before me like an impending storm. Join us, they chorused as I stood frozen, surrounded by shadows twinkling with malice, and I realized with pure horror that my life was no longer my own. And then, just as the darkness encroached upon me, I heard a loud bang from inside the house once more. The door swung open with a wail, and the last thing I saw before the shadows engulfed me was my own face emerging from the porch, eyes wide and wild, grinning with an impossible understanding. "It's your turn to help." The world had become a warped reflection of itself, as if I had stepped through a glass darkly. I was no longer certain where I stood, what was real, and what was the fevered dream of madness mingled with agony. The figures that surrounded me were now a seething mass, suffused with an energy that pulsated and writhed. They were twisted echoes of my past, each one a flicker of memory, blurred by layers of torment. "Please," I whispered, voice barely escaping my lips as my heart raced in a frantic rhythm. "What do you want from me?" The words fell away into the air, carried off without answer. Instead, they closed in, pressing tightly against my skin, their cold breath wrapping around me like a shroud. Suddenly, a frigid gust of wind swept through the trees, dispersing the shadows momentarily. In that split second, clarity broke through the anguished cacophony. I saw the figures shift again, their forms flickering like old film, revealing the faces of friends and family, long gone but never forgotten. Each face appeared to plead, mouths moving in silent anguish. Then I felt an unseen force pulling me back toward the house. The shadows twisted, coiling around my body, urging me toward that cursed threshold where darkness yawned like a black hole. The urge to run surged within me, but I was instilled with a morbid curiosity. What did my other self, me own doppelganger, know? Once more, the door creaked open. I stole a glimpse inside. The interior was vast now, moving beyond the dimensions of mere rooms, resembling an endless maze. I could hear the echo of laughter hurriedly morphing into weeping. But above it all surged one voice, rising from within the churning shadows that dripped from the walls, a familiar voice that tugged at my heart. "Come back to me." It called softly, soaking in honeyed sorrow. I stepped inside, drawn toward the cauldron of malevolence, feeling the very fibers of reality unravel with each step. The darkness coiled tightly around my throat, and I struggled to breathe. It felt alive, as if it were feeding, siphoning my fear, my confusion, my very essence. The laughter grew louder, the shadows flickering like flames against the walls that dripped in grotesque imagery of loss. "Help us break free. You can still make a choice," echoed the agonized faces painted into the very structure of the house, a plea vibrating through the air that forced my heart into an ischemic rhythm that I staggered further in, unable to resist. And there it stood, the doppelganger, smiling with an unsettling understanding that stretched from ear to ear. It wore a guise of familiarity, yet every detail was twisted, haunted echoes of who I used to be. Why are you doing this?" I shouted into the shadows, voice trembling. "It's liberating. You'll remember you have to find the key." It motioned toward its own chest, where a small golden key blinked, pulsing in the darkness like an unholy heartbeat. "Unlock what is yours." In that instant, the world shifted again, a wrenching of reality that forced me to my knees. The floor began to dissolve beneath me, expanding into an abyss that shimmered with memories unspent and thoughts suffocated by despair. I reached for the doppelganger, hoping against hope for some semblance of human connection. But the moment I brushed its arm, I was plunged into an overwhelming flood of memory as my childhood, moments of joy interspersed with flashes of terror that twisted my past into a canvas painted with dread. "Keep digging, you can't keep hiding from it," its voice echoed again, taunting yet earnest. I saw sights of my loved ones moments before their vanished essence was captured by the shadows. Each twist and turn I had taken in this godforsaken life. Suddenly, the ground shuddered violently, splitting apart like an earthquake of despair. I couldn't hold on any longer. I felt myself slipping into the void, the shadows racing toward me, their cries rising to a maddening pitch. "Join us!" they screamed, their bodies contorting, becoming monstrous beyond recognition. I fought against the pull of the darkness, desperation igniting a wild, primal instinct. I could sense the key's magnetic draw. What did it unlock, and at what cost? And then, as I teetered on the edge of the abyss, I noticed something scrawled on the walls, my own name, etched in the language of the damned, surrounded by countless others, all intertwined in an endless loop of the forgotten. My heart raced with revelation. In my final moment of clarity, I grasped the fabric of my reality tightly, releasing a deep, shrill scream that echoed into the void, and then everything went black as cold darkness enveloped me. I felt something cold and metallic in my hand, the golden key. But before I had a chance to comprehend my fate, I heard a deep, reverberating laughter that sent shivers down my spine, echoing not from my doppelganger, but from the very walls that had sheltered my fears. "What will you unlock?" it taunted, as the ground began to shift beneath my feet, once more pulling me down into the depths of oblivion, amid the rising chorus of despair. And then, with a harsh, abrupt clarity, I heard the whispers return, now louder, more desperate. "You must choose. Will you rise or will you fall?" The shadows throbbed, hungry to consume my answer as I hovered on the brink of liberation or damnation. The choice was mine, but at what cost? The weight of the key felt significantly heavier now, pressing against my palm like a buried secret demanding to be unearthed. My senses screamed, warning me not to act, yet I was drawn to the soft, pleading shadows that swirled and contorted around me. The laughter from the walls morphed into a chilling symphony, vibrating in my bones, compelling me to understand their twisted desires. Just as I began to recall the stories of those who had come before me, I was plunged deeper into the pulsing darkness, where memories of my past fused frighteningly with sinister whispers. "You bear the burden of guilt," they hissed. "You must confront it, only then can you break the cycle." In that oppressive moment, the shadows shifted, forming a new tableau, vivid and grotesque, playing out just before me like an ancient ritual. Each agonizing scene was a chapter of suffering I had been too fearful to revisit. My mother's anguished cries as she faded from memory, my father's fractured mind unraveling in front of me, and the shadows that coiled around my brother's laughter, silencing it forever. Face your past. My doppelganger urged, its voice possessive, almost seductive. Your key will unleash the truth. No, I roared, hurling the words into the suffocating void, not ready to relive that pain. Anger bubbled within me, a thin veil against an overwhelming tide of grief. Yet the shadows seemed undeterred, their whispers sharpening into a cacophony of demands, as if my every internal struggle fed their insatiable hunger. Unlock it. We wait for you. We wait for your truth, your terror, they chanted with a violent shake of my head. I dropped to my knees, crushed beneath the weight of their promises. Please leave me alone. It was like begging a storm to stop raging, useless and futile. But the ground beneath me trembled again, shifting and sloping away, as though inviting me to descend further into the depths of this nightmare. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself not to drown in the memories swirling around me. I pried them open when a cold finger grazed my cheek, meticulously following the lines of sorrow etched across my face. I recoiled, my heart racing, while the air grew thick with a sulphurous scent, intoxicating and suffocating. I looked up, and there it was, a shadow emerging from the darkness, a figure clothed in sorrow, face obscured and shifting rapidly, revealing momentary glimpses of someone I once knew. There was my brother, his smile fading into a grimace, then switching to faces of strangers, each one twisting in a grotesque ballet of despair. Help us, the figure pleaded, voice laced with a grief that echoed through the labyrinth of shadows. The sorrow twisted in on itself, feeding the very walls that encased my suffocation. Unlock the truth to save us. Truth? I whispered, as doubt lanced through my resolve. What truth? What do you want from me? Your pain is our prison. Your fear is our chains. Only by confronting your darkest memories can we rise. The shadows lurched hungrily forward, spilling like ink on water, eager to drown me in their communal agony. Summoning every shard of strength, I staggered to my feet, clutching the key tightly. Its surface gleamed in the feeble light that pulsed from within the Shadowsa beacon of hope or doom. Repeating the memories of agony roiled in my mind, I felt a shift, an understanding. This was not merely about might extended far beyond, reaching into the lives attached to mine. Lives I had lost, lives that had been stripped away. I need to help them. I breathed, each word a vow, but the moment I resolved to act, an unearthly sound erupted, a cacophony of shrieks echoing from every shadow, their hunger morphing into a united roar of fury. The shadows writhed, twisting and pulling against the invisible tether that anchored them to my being, desperate to retain their grasp. You cannot. You will not. My heart thundered, drowning out their cries as I lifted the key high above my head, the golden hue illuminating the darkness for a brief moment. Together we will break free. Just as I plunged the key toward the canvas of sorrow slathered across the walls, a fissure opened, swallowing the light. The shadows screamed in rage, their voices mingling with an anguished wail that sent shivers down my spine. In that final moment, just as the key sank into the heart of the dark chasm, the wall split open with a violent shudder, drawing me closer to its gaping maw, a swell of memories crashing over me like a tidal wave. And then, everything stilled. Silence reigned, pregnant, heavy. I stood poised at the threshold of oblivion when all at once, a blinding light erupted from the Fishurian explosion of fury and release that threw me backward into the cold embrace of darkness. Do you understand now? A warped voice rasped, echoing through the void, each syllable separating and dissecting the lingering hope in my chest. You sought to help them, but at what cost? Every decision taints the fabric of eternity. And just as I began to scream, the light engulfed me, and the shadows pulled me into the depths of the unknown, where dark truths lay waiting. The price of liberation was yet to be revealed. The silence wrapped around me, suffocating, blinding. The essence of raw fear seeped into the cracks of my resolve. I lay prostrate, struggling to comprehend where I was. The blinding light finally dimmed, transforming into flickering shadows that danced like phantoms on the walls of an oppressive hall, thick with despair. I pushed myself up, my breath echoing eerily, but I sensed them, those wretched spirits hovering, waiting. I glanced around, trying to ground myself. The walls were adorned with dark portraits, each face fixed in exalted torment. Accusing eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that ignited my skin. My heartbeat quickened as a whisper slithered through the air. "Thank you for freeing us. Now, share your truth." "I know. I didn't free anyone," I cried, each word shattering the monotonous silence. "I just wanted to end this." The portrait eyes glimmered, surprised at my defiance. "End this? You have yet to understand. What remains for us, for Yui's far more sinister than mere release." The spectral voices ebbed and flowed like the tide, each whisper drawing closer, their grasp tightening around my throat. Suddenly, a figure materialized in front of Maya's faceless shadow. An echo of grief weighted with lambent sorrow. "You cannot escape," it warned, its voice surging into a rasping crescendo. "You are bound by the truth, by every life you touched or failed to protect." I staggered back into the brittle wall as memories lapped at me like a relentless tie to me mother's heartbreak. My brother's laughter now silenced. My father's rage transformed into despair. The horror twisted within me, knotting deeper, suffocating my spirit. "No, I didn't mean for any of this to happen," I wailed, grasping my temples to block out the suffocating memories that surged. "Yet your actions have sent ripples through time," the figure intoned, coalescing into the shape of my brother, his eyes hollow, a cavity of despair reflecting back at me. "We linger in your conscience, but we are not alone." As if summoned by his words, the portraits began to writhe, and shapes emerged from them, lost souls, twisted figures, begging for forgiveness, reverberating with endless pain. Their mouths stretched into silent screams, but I could hear them, their sorrow clung to my skin like a shroud. "Look around, beloved. This is your legacy, wrought by choices you've made." My brother's phantom said, his voice thick with dread. "This is what they mean when they say truth is a weapon." That I sank to my knees, unarmed and trembling, as the wailing sphere encircled me, blurring the line between my torment and theirs. Each soul flickered like a dying flame, catching, twisting, until the shadows spiraled into an abyss of violent chorus clamoring for my attention. "Unlock our stories," one cooed, its voice sharp and crystalline, "and face the depths of your own. The key is the anchor of your shared pain," another echoed, weaving through the air, "the truth you've buried beneath fear. I sense the weight of it, it draws you to me, it binds you to us." "No," I screamed, clutching my head as the wails merged into a lament that threatened to crush my mind. "I can't bear this. I can't bear your truth." Eyes open, grimy, bloodshot eyes emerged from the walls, their pupils radiating accusation. They reached out almost playfully, fingers elongated, curling menacingly as they whispered in sickened unity. "You wanted to help, didn't you? Then face the horrors of your past." Pain lanced through my chest as they chanted, savage and hypnotic. "Tell us your story. Speak it, relive it. Only then shall we find rest." With each passing shadow, I felt their memories intertwine with Minaya's spiraling mass of darkness tightening around my heart. Desperation washed over me. The boundaries of reality dissolved, making way for something grotesquely beautiful. As I wrestled with an unquenchable dread, the key began to pulse, glowing with ghostly light, as though daring me to give in, to confess, to unlock the vault of my suffering. The whispers coaxed me, inviting me to play along, to participate in this dance of decaying souls that demanded absolution. I can't," I gasped, feeling the gnarled hands of my brother's ghost on my shoulders, urging me closer to the brink. "You're not real. This can't be happening. Real or not, this is your reckoning." The cacophony screeched, a tide of voices surging, washing over me like corrosive acid. "You will give us the truth, or you will forever drown in your own silence." The words had barely fallen when the ground quaked violently beneath me, fissures infiltrating the walls, the very fabric of my being trembled violently as shadows released their chaotic fury. I lunged for stability, but the world twisted upon itself, inhaling the very air from my lungs. I could feel a whirlwind of memories trying to break me, pushing me against the eternal abyss, and as the shadows screamed, as their voices melded into one deafening roar. I could hear words crawled from the depths of my soul, urging me past fear and into the truth I had long kept buried. I remember everything. The walls shook, pulsing with my fear as around me. Souls wept and writhed, their sorrow soaking into the floor beneath our feet until I felt the very ground drop away. Before I could grasp any semblance of reality, everything plunged. Darkness swallowed me whole, and in that moment, I realized I had unlocked something far worse than I had bargained for. And just as I believed I might descend into the nothingness, a talk of a clock reverberated through the void, layering the silence with a dreadful weight, demanding I face what rose to the surface with horrifying intensity. Are you ready to meet the darkest part of yourself? A voice mocked, echoing from the depths, and I plunged into the darkness, flung into a world where my own emotions morphed into the very monsters I had feared. The air shifted, thickening with an oppressive weight that pressed against my lungs as I drifted through the void. Time lost all meaning. The eternal darkness was punctuated only by the distant echoes of my own heartbeat, each thud echoing like a death knell in my ears. I was no longer simply a witness to the torment surrounding me. Was steeped in my own inner abyss, destined to confront the horrors I had buried deep within. Suddenly, a glimmer of light pierced the darkness, illuminating spectral figures with twisted faces, their expressions mirroring my deepest fears. They rippled before me, flickering like candles on the verge of extinguishing. It wasn't just their reflections that petrified me, it was the stories they carried. The truths I had shunned all my life, now surfacing like ghosts desperate for revenge. Did you think you could evade us? A wretched voice crooned, slithering through the air as it coiled around my throat. We are the forgotten threads in your tapestry. Each one of us holds a piece of your truth. You cannot run from what you've hidden. I stumbled backward, the swirling shadows crashing against me, each whisper resounding within. Images flickered like a flickering film reel. A stranger's pleading eyes, blood on my hands, a child's laughter morphing into a screech of terror. The echoes roared, engulfing me in chaos. Somehow I knew they each had a name. Each figure bore the consequences of choices I had tried to bury beneath layers of guilt and pain. Then, amidst the swirling cacophony, a familiar face appeared. My mother, aglow with sorrow, the pain etched in her eyes as she regarded me. You thought I wouldn't know? That I wouldn't see what you've become? Her voice pierced the darkness like a dagger, resonating with the agony of so many lost years. You're still the same child who watched but did nothing to know. I tried to save you. My protests felt feeble, dissolving into the howling winds of the abyss like dust. She simply shook her head, her features contorting with grief. Too late for tried. Too late for saving. She intoned sorrowfully before dissolving into a cascade of darkness, sending chills racing down my spine. Then, the shadows intensified, swirling faster, closing in around me, and suddenly, I was no longer in the void. I stood in the cold embrace of a shack. The air stank of mildew and despair. The walls closed in like a vice, and I could hear the muffled cries of a child from within the darkened corners. Help me, a tiny voice echoed. It was her, the girl I failed to save. The memories surged, crashing down around me like waves against a fragile shore. I could feel her terror, the agony of abandonment thrumming in the air. No. My heart raced as I stumbled further into the recesses of the shack, chasing the cries that clawed at my heart and tore at my sanity. Each step I took in that suffocating blackness was filled with dread, shadows lurking at the edges, their malevolent presence mocking my attempts to atone. The child's voice faded, but in its place, an echoing silence screamed at me, a silence filled with everything I'd ignored, each echo wrapping tightly around my soul. In the corner, shrouded in darkness, a door beckoned, old and crooked, quivering under the weight of my fear. Layers of dust caked on the Surfacian ominous threshold, whispering terrible secrets. You can see what lies beyond. The familiar ghostly presence dripped into my mind, the child's fear merging with my own. But to know is to bear the truth, and truth has a price. That I hesitated. A whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. Would seeking the truth free me? Or would it condemn me? The shadows pressed against me, their fingers caressing the edges of my sanity, drawing me closer to the door. I felt their hunger. They demanded my compliance in one desperate motion. I reached for the tarnished knob, turning it with the weight of every regret I held, the creaking hinges singing a chilling symphony of dread. As the door swung wide, a blinding light flooded into the room, momentarily blinding me, consuming the gnarled shadows that had clung to my soul. And there she stood, a reflection of innocence lost, the embodiment of my failures and every hope I'd abandoned. Her eyes, wide and glistening with fear, held a terrible truth. "You left me," she whispered, each syllable biting deep into my heart. "You did nothing. It's time to pay for your inaction." As the room warped around me, becoming a whirlwind of color splattered with agony, I stumbled backward, realizing the shadows had erupted from the door, swirling into a maelstrom that threatened to consume her and me. "No, I will not let you take her," I cried, my voice lost among the ethereal screams, shadows snaking toward my wrists, lifting me off my feet. But then I felt her little hand grasp mine, a fragile warmth amidst the cold, a lifeline. Her eyes bore into my soul, pleading, "Will you face the darkness? Or will you remain forever trapped in this cycle of pain?" Just then, the ground beneath us cracked open, revealing an abyss that pulsed with sickening allure. If I chose to face the darkness, she would be lost. If I turned away, I would be lost. "Choose," the shadows shrieked, whirling in ferocious frenzy, ready to peel away the remnants of my soul. And as I felt the pull, teetering on the edge of oblivion, I realized I had but a heartbeat left to make my choice. The child's grip tightened, and the darkness roared around us as I prepared to leap into destruction or salvation. And with a heart-stopping twist, the ground below gave way entirely, plunging us into the depths of an unimaginable nightmare. Would I confront the horrors I had sought to flee, or would I be swallowed into the depths of despair forever? As I fell into the abyss, gravity seemed to stretch into eternity, each heartbeat echoing louder in my ears as I plummeted through the suffocating darkness. The child's small hand slipped from mine, the space between us swelling with an unbearable weight. Panic clawed at my throat, a mixture of terror and regret spiraling in my gut, the realization that I had just lost her to the void. Then, the sensation shifted, the frigid air igniting into flames, suffocating heat enveloping me as I tumbled through a vortex of swirling colors. I landed hard on the ground, gasping for breath. My surroundings materialized into a landscape neither of this world nor the next. A desolate wasteland of rotting trees twisted into grotesque forms, their branches clawing toward a sickly green sky, every fiber of the atmosphere saturated with decay. I blinked furiously, trying to shake off the disorientation. The air buzzed with a sinister energy, shadows flitting in the corners of my vision, whispering secrets I was too afraid to hear. The land felt alive, hungry. "Welcome." A sibilant voice slithered through the air, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand. The ground began to ripple, and out of the earth emerged twisted figures, their bodies adorned with remnants of forgotten dreams and shattered hopes. Faces twisted in silent screams stared at me, their mouths stretched wide but soundless, ghosts of those I had wronged. "You thought you could escape your sins? Here you are, nestled among your failures." My heart raced. They were here, all of them, the stranger, the child, my mother. The weight of guilt burned hot in my chest, the reeking stench of their discontent invading my senses. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice cracking at the edges. To witness. To atone, the voice coiled around me, wrapping me in a spectral embrace. "The child is merely the beginning. Her pain, it intertwines with yours. You may have left her behind, but you will face the consequences of your absence." As the murmurs grew louder, pulsing like a hypnotic chant, I felt the ground tremble beneath me. Shadows closed in, an overwhelming wave of despair crashing against my resolve. Memories that were not my own began to infiltrate my mind, flickers of anguish, betrayal, and the haunting laughter of the little girl echoed in dissonance. Every heartbeat was a reminder of my cowardice. "Do you remember the day you chose silence over bravery?" The slithering voice urged, relentless in its pursuit to expose the rawness of my failures. You stood by while she cried, didn't you? You, of all people, should know that inaction is a choice. Stop! I screamed impotently as the air thickened, binding me in place. I was overwhelmed, trapped between the weight of remembrance and the unyielding gravity of guilt. But deep down, buried under the avalanche of emotions, a flicker of resolve ignited a desperate need to escape this twisted play of horrors. Face your past. The shadows howled, and with a violent rush, they surged forward, tearing my mind apart. I was thrust into a whirlwind of images. The icy grip of fear that paralyzed me, the innocent laughter of that little girl turned to wails of despair, each ounce of suffering gnashing at the fabric of my reality, pulling me deeper into their web. Then a sudden silence fell, shocking in its intensity. I opened my eyes to find myself standing at the edge of a precipice. The ground crumbled beneath my feet, a chasm filled with flickering memories where countless shadows writhed, their whispers curling around my mind. But there, amid the chaos, stood the child lost yet ever vibrant. My heart leapt. Blood rushed in my ears. She looked at me with eyes pleading for salvation, the flickering light of hope illuminating her face for just a moment before it dimmed. Save me, she whispered, her voice a haunting melody that resonated with my yearning to do the right thing, yet it resonated with an undercurrent of warning. But know this, to save me is to confront them. Are you willing to face your greatest fear? The void yawned wider behind her, shadows inching ever closer, their presence suffocating. My heart raced. Could I risk everything to pull her back from the brink? Or would this choice imprison me further into the darkness that sought to engulf both of us? Save me, she echoed again, her voice morphing into cries of despair as the shadows lunged. And with my heart frozen in terror, and the world scrambling beneath my feet, I had just a breath left to respond. In a heartbeat, I would decide. Retreat into the arms of oblivion, or leap into the chaos, embracing the nightmare for one final chance to redeem my soul. But before I could gather my resolve, the ground beneath me cracked and sent both of us spiraling back into the abyss, her terrified scream reverberating through my core, echoing into the void as darkness swallowed us whole. I plummeted deeper, spiraling in what felt like a vortex of despair, the child's agonizing cries resonating hauntingly within me. Each second stretched into infinity, reality fracturing around us as I fell through layers of turbulent memories. I grasped at shadows, trying to take hold of something, anything to hoist us back to safety. But the air was a dense murk, filled with the sounds of anguished voices and lamenting wails that sent shivers up my spine. When the world finally reformed around me, I gasped for breath, emerging into an unsettling dimness, the remnants of the chasm now blending with an ominous forest. The stench of rotten leaves and something far more sinister hung in the air, tainting my lungs. The trees were not just twisted. They seemed sentient, tendrils of mist rising from them like grasping fingers, reaching out to entwine around me. Where are you? I called, desperation gnawing at my sanity, each word swallowed by the heavy silence. The ground quaked as if responding to my fear, the earth trembling beneath my feet. And then I heard Ida's soft giggle, sweet yet tainted with dread, spiraling through the trees and sending icicles of fear into my veins. Help me, please! Her voice broke through the fog of darkness. It sounded so close yet was lost among the labyrinthine trunks of the forest, each gnarled limb twisting like skeletal arms in a desperate dance. My chest constricted as I stumbled toward the sound, drawn by an invisible tether. Hold on, I'm coming. Each step felt increasingly weighted, as if the forest itself resentfully held me back, branches snagging at my clothes and hair as I pushed through. The laughter morphed into a symphony of cries, echoing from all directions, voices intertwining and weaving the tale of torment inflicted upon those who had strayed too far into these woods. With every step, the trees seemed to lean closer, their bark pulsing with unnatural life. Curious eyes opened along the crooked trunks, watching me with an inscrutable hunger. The underbrush became thick, roots snaked around my ankles, tightening like bands of iron, a warning of what could come if I lingered too long. Fear coiled around my throat, squeezing tighter. Then I saw Ida, faint glow flickering through the dense foliage ahead. My heart surged with hope as I stumbled toward it. I'm coming, I gasped, furious determination battling the darkness threatening to confine me. As I reached the clearing, I stopped dead in my tracks, the cold rush of shock paralyzing me, and in the center stood the child, framed by an ethereal light, yet as I approached, horror clawed at my insides. Her eyes, a mirror of innocence, were marred by something sinister. The shadowy figures of the damned loomed behind her, fingers splayed wide, merging into the landscape as they watched. They whispered her name, but the sound was suffocated by regret and anguish. Ribbons of darkness entwined around her, pulling her deeper into the mire that had entrapped us both. "Oh," I cried out, reaching my hand toward her. "Stay where you are." But as I lurched forward, the ground shifted violently beneath me, swallowing the very fabric of the light as the trees closed in, branches scraping against my skin, leaving trails of sorrow. "Why didn't you save me before?" she asked, her voice now drenched in disappointment, laced with the remnants of her joy. The shadows flared behind her, circling as they fed off her despair. I could feel their energy, cold and intoxicating, anguishing me in turn. I flinched. "You've abandoned me." Tremors of guilt surged, resonating with her accusation. "I'm here now. Just hold on," I shouted, struggling to push through the tightening grip of the forest. But suddenly, the laughter returned, maniacal, echoing around us. The shadows seized the moment, flooding the clearing, pinning my feet to the ground. I tried to scream, but words evaporated as choking tendrils wrapped around me, binding tighter with each passing moment. I was torn between the horror of her gaze and the grisly energy feeding off the shadows, where every anguished spirit reified with every heartbeat, seeking solace in the darkness. "Please, no." I fought against the suffocating void that enveloped us, but just then, I felt a terrible rendinga violent tear through my soul, pulling me in two directions. The face of the child blurred. A friend, an innocent, reflected my past failures. My vision fractured as the darkness threatened to consume my mind. I thought just for a second of fleeing, of letting the void take her, to shield myself from the inevitable. But like a punch to the gut, my own betrayal drowned me. The shadows pushed deeper into my psyche, their laughter reverberating in my mind as her image faded, and then the forest gasped in a final, thunderous roar. The last thing I saw was her face, contorted in fear, as the shadows completely enveloped me. Before I could grasp what was happening, I was thrust into another abyss, a familiar one, and at its edge, I glimpsed reflections of faces I thought I'd left behind. A mirror of sinners, of the lost. With a jolt, the truth hit me hard. The child, the guilt, the forest cloaked in deception. It was all a trap woven to draw me in deeper, and escape would come at a price as the reflection sharpened. I realized not only the child was lost but a part of me too, and even as I began to scream, everything plunged into darkness. The darkness was absolute, heavy and suffocating. It engulfed me, pulling me into a bottomless void where time ceased to exist, and the weight of my own fears encapsulated me in a shroud of despair. I crashed to the ground, disoriented, landing on a surface that felt both cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth of flesh that had just slipped away. As I struggled to my feet, I sensed I was not alone. The chill of that place made my skin crawl, and I could hear faint whispers resonating in the darkness. It was not just the laughter of the shadows but something else, a chorus of lost souls lamenting in the void. Each whispered name felt like a dagger, pricking at wounds I thought were long healed. Memories crept back, cold tendrils of regret coiling around my heart, suffocating hope with every breath. Then, in that thick blackness, a light flickered, distant yet achingly familiar. I leaned toward it, praying that the luminous figure in the haze belonged to her sweet, innocent face just within reach. But as I moved closer, the reality of the image shifted and wavered, morphing into something grotesque and contorted. It was not her, but a reflection of despair, me betrayal personified through shadowy figures that writhed and giggled, feeding off my torment. "Welcome back," they jeered, their voices a cacophony of mockery that echoed endlessly, stretching the fabric of the void. "You thought you lost us, but we have only just begun." Panic surged through me as the light flickered out, and darkness consumed everything, sweeping across the ground like an incoming tide. I stumbled back, my heart racing, my instincts screaming for me to escape. But the whispers coalesced, sharpening into a single voice that cut through the clamor, a calling that reverberated through my bones. "You cannot leave. Not yet," it said, intoxicatingly smooth yet lined with a chilling edge. "You owe us. You've tasted the despair of your choices. Yet the banquet is not complete. You must feast upon the fears of those you abandoned." Images flashed before my eyes, glimmers of lives unraveling moments of abandonment, cries for help echoing in my mind, drowning out reason. I saw faces of those I once left in the shadows, caught in cycles of pain that I had chosen to ignore. Hugging tighter to my chest, I realized that every soul I'd turned away had become a part of this curse, a product of my negligence. "Join us," the voice coaxed. "Embrace your true self, the monster you've hidden beneath the facade of kindness. You can break free, but only if you are willing to accept the truth. And know." I gasped, clawing at my throat as revulsion washed over me. There has to be a way to stop this. There is no escape," a chorus of tortured voices replied, sending a ripple of despair through me. "Listen to them, taste their sorrow. The darkness will always be part of you, until it consumes you whole." A rustling sound broke through the stillness, violent and chaotic, as if the shadows were awakening, stirring from their slumber. I turned, and a faceless figure emerged from the murk, shrouded entirely by darkness, its presence radiating malice. It reached for me with skeletal hands, a harbinger of everything I feared becoming lost, forsaken, consumed by my own dark choices. Enraged and terrified, I bolted in the opposite direction. The shadows writhed with every step I took, gripping at my ankles with icy fingers, pulling me back toward the heart of despair. A surge of adrenaline sent me racing, weaving through what seemed to be an endless expanse of torment, where cries of the forsaken echoed louder, urging their lamentations as I struggled to break free of the yoke tightening around my heart. But as I neared a flickering light, the anguish suddenly shifted, replaced by a soft, mocking laughter. I halted in my tracks, dread flooding through me as I recognized that laughter it was hers, echoing in all its twisted glory. The growl of the shadows faded, and the landscape around me morphed yet again, revealing a horrific tableau of children, all distorted and wretched, their faces stained with tears and void of hope. "Oh!" I screamed, clapping my hands to my ears as the amalgam of suffering surged toward me. But I couldn't drown them out. The sounds melded into a sickening symphony, guilt personified, each note sharper than the last as it enveloped me, and right at the heart stood the child, her eyes wide and brimming with a sorrowful knowing. "You didn't listen before, why would you now?" she asked, her voice echoing with despair that gouged into my heart. The ground shook violently beneath me, fissures cracking along the earth, revealing the depths of the abyss below, a yawning maw of darkness ready to devour everything. I glanced back toward the fading light, but the figures loomed closer, their grip tightening paralytically around me, and I realized with horror that I had to make a choice. Plunge into the void below and merge with the dark, or face the cacophony of lost children who would soon drag me into their embrace of eternal suffering. "Help me!" I cried, but my voice was lost amid the wails and whispers, drowning in the suffocating grip of the shadows. And then, just as I thought I would be swept into the darkness, I felt an icy hand clasp onto mine from the side. "You will be just like me," the voice whispered, leaving the lingering echo of her laughter behind. I looked down, and my breath caught in my throat. It was my own hand, reaching back into the shadows, gripping me tighter than ever. I gasped as I realized who I truly had become. I stood there, paralyzed as my reflection echoed back a ghastly contortion of who I once was. The figure grinned wickedly, my lips stretching into an impossible smile that wasn't mine. It was ugly, twisted by pain and regret, the very embodiment of everything I had tried to escape. My own hand clasped the cold, shadowy wrist, and the sinister truth echoed through the void. I was not just a tortured soul. I was a conduit for the darkness I sought to reject. "You thought you could save her?" My own voice dripped with venom, mocking and cruel. You can't save anyone when you can't even save yourself. The child's cries mingled with the darkness swirling around us, each echo amplifying the despair suffocating me. I could feel the weight of every choice I had made, every instance of inaction bearing down on my soul. The memories flooded back the moments I stood by while others suffered, held back by fear, by apathy. They danced tauntingly before my eyes, each one a reminder of her face, the laughter that had turned into wails of despair. Join us, the shadows whispered, now alluring and inviting. Embrace your true nature. You're one of us now. And beneath it all, beneath the agony and the screams, a flicker of longing whispered within me. It tugged at the fraying edges of my sanity, the allure of surrendering to this gilded cage of darkness, to become the monster that had always lingered just beneath the surface. I had sought to escape it, yet here I was, fracturing into pieces that fit too well into that void of sorrow. Help me. The child's voice pierced anew, but this time, it was mingled with my own voice, pleading from the depths of my being. Cringing, I felt that flicker morph into something far darker, a desire not just to absolve myself, but to dominate the despair that swirled like a tempest. My grasp tightened around my shadowy self, the laughter morphing into an enchanting melody that drowned out the cries of the lost. I was seduced by the whispers promising power and liberation. I could reclaim what was lost, wield the anguish of the forsaken as my weapon. Do it, it urged, my doppelganger's gaze igniting a maelstrom of desire. Unlock the dark within. You can be free, just like us. Alarms blared in my mind, the echoes of the child screaming, "Don't leave me." Yet as I faced the swelling tide of shadows clawing at my heart, the truth crystallized. The shadows didn't just want to consume me. They wanted to empower me. An overwhelming fury consumed me as I looked down at my hands, now gripped in darkness. No, I roared, my voice a shriek that split the fabric of the abyss. I was slipping, spiraling toward the unforgiving edge of oblivion where the child's cries faded from my mind, swallowed by the raw threat of what I might become. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into howls, the shadows contorting in outrage, and the ground beneath us trembled violently. Darkness thickened as it spiraled up around us, shrouding my vision and pushing me further down that path. I felt temptation clawing at the edges of my sanity, the wreathing shadows whispering treacherously in my ears. But in that moment of weakness, through the blinding chaos, clarity flicked like a dying flame, the realization that though I was being consumed, I could still choose. I could dive deeper into this consuming void or fight to rise against it and save her. I took a step back, a visceral shriek tearing from my throat. I chose to fight, sweeping away the torment from my mind. I pushed against the darkness with every ounce of strength I could muster. My body ignited with a burning resolve, the chains of despair snapping as I surged forward against the tide of shadows. Let her go, I cried, channeling every regret, every anguish into that singular phrase. The shadows screamed in turmoil, wailing back, "You cannot resist. This is your fate." But with every pulse of violent defiance, I felt the binds wither as I surged closer to the child's fading figure, the dim light pulsating and flickering as if drawing closer. I reached for her, tears streaming down my cheeks, and grasped her tiny hand. "Please, forgive me. I won't abandon you again," she gasped, her face brightening with a flicker of hope amidst the chaos, glowing as shadows screamed in fury. And in an act of sheer will, I turned back, that alternate version of myself unraveling like a thread. "Join me. We are stronger united." She nodded, and together we launched back through the torrent of shadows clapping to consume us, the barriers between darkness and light obliterating as we fought side by side against the overpowering tide. But just as the shadows began to fade, I felt a fierce grip tightening around my heart, the sensation of being torn between two worlds. "You cannot escape your truth. You belong to us," the deep voice hissed, pulling me deeper into the chaos. "Oh, I choose love over darkness," I screamed, as it felt like my soul was splitting in two, and in that moment, I felt the weight of every choice I had ever made converge into one final choice. To let go of the past, with a surge of strength born from the love of that innocent child, I broke through, and a blinding flash enveloped us as we emerged from the shadows into a world bathed in blinding light. As we gazed around, the forest faded, shadows dissolving into whispers and cries of release. She was free, the weight of her lost laughter invigorating my spirit. But as I pulled her into my embrace, I felt a cold grip pulling at my heart, the shadows flickering one last time. And that's when I realized the battle wasn't over. As we turned to leave, a haunting voice echoed, "You may have saved her, but the darkness within you remains. I will wait, I will always be here." As we fled into the light, a cruel realization settled in. The darkness within had not been vanquished but merely awoken, latent yet powerful, lurking in the recesses of my mind, waiting for the next chance to emerge. And as the last echoes of the cacophony faded into the abyss behind us, I understood the true horror was not the shadows prowling beyond, but the monster that waited patiently within, and the price of that salvation was yet to be revealed. You can escape the shadows, but the shadows will never escape you, I whispered as a chill brushed against my spine, the laughter of the lost resounding in my ears, endlessly haunting in its promise.